I love that scene because he's really like pouring into his successor. He's pouring into, he really wants Moose in this case to know, kind of to be bold and to be courageous and to how to win the respect of his men and just really, it's a really cool pep talk.
Welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. Men's Alliance is a growing movement of tribes across the nation that meet weekly for rugged outdoor workouts and a real-world devotion around a fire. If you want to be a part of what we're doing, join us at men'salliancetribe.com, where you can find a tribe near you or come to one of our Start the Fire weekends. So check us out at men'salliancetribe.com. Now stay tuned for this great podcast. Welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. I'm Dave Mills Goose.
And I'm Dusty Parker Shadow.
Ty Madden call sign Savage.
All right, Savage. We got Savage with us today. Savage is the tribe leader at Spartan Tribe, which is in Haymarket, Virginia. So he started that tribe just last year. We met Savage at the Ignite conference back in March of 23. And man, it feels like it's been like 2 or 3 years. But it's just not even quite been one. And right. He stopped by our booth and met us at our booth, and then goes on to launch a tribe in Northern Virginia. And
he is all in.
And it is an awesome tribe. That tribe, Spartan Tribe, is crushing it. And so we're happy to have you. Welcome, Savage. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Goose and Shadow. It's a pleasure.
And we're just gonna have a cool conversation today. This is part 3 in our leadership lessons from Band of Brothers series that we're doing. And so, what we're doing is we're just taking a different tribe leader from a different state, and each time we're discussing 2 episodes of the HBO series Band of Brothers, because that series is so rich in leadership lessons. Some really great leadership lessons and some really bad leadership lessons. So we have a lot to learn from the good and the bad. And so just kind of like some guys sitting around discussing a movie, right, is kind of what we're going for. And so I asked Savage if he would watch episodes 5 and 6 and just kick us off, man. Just tell us a little bit about, let's start with episode 5. Tell us a little bit about what you liked about it, and we can talk about some examples of good leadership, and then we'll do bad.
Sounds good. Well, you're probably going to kick me off the podcast right out of the gate when I say this, but prior to watching episode 5 and 6, or even the Band of Brothers series, I had never sat down and watched it. I hate to admit that, so you guys could probably go ahead and hit the stop button right now. But I loved it. It was really an amazing series. I'd heard a lot about it. So with respect to episode 5, you've got Captain, Winters, and he's an amazing figure, an amazing leader. And I'm sure you're hearing this from some of the other men you have on the podcast, but just his leadership, it's a really interesting dynamic watching Band of Brothers from a leadership perspective. I wouldn't have normally sat down and kind of looked at it through the lens of leadership. But
totally agree.
Winters is just an amazing character, so he knows all of his men, by name. He knows what makes them tick. He knows a lot of them, he can tell just where they're at in terms of getting close to their breaking point. So he's just got an amazing emotional connection with his men. And he's technically proficient in just about every aspect of combat and military. And I never served, so let me just pause and say thank you so much to you all, Shadow and Goose, with your service, and those listening that have served. I've never served, and just it was an amazing opportunity to just watch that. But he was so technically proficient with combat that he would often do solo reconnaissance by himself, just to make sure that he sized up the field, before he would put any of his men in harm's way. And so just watching episode 5 was, for me, really focusing on Winters, the character, and then Lieutenant Nixon alongside him. So there's a lot to unpack with episode 5, and then episode 6 was almost a completely different character set. So we'll unpack that here soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. Episode 5 is my favorite. It's my favorite in the whole series. I love 5. And then you're right. 6 is like its own thing. They kind of like take a break and do something different. Give us a specific example from episode 5 of great leadership. What's something that happens in there?
Yeah, sure. So there's a scene where they're essentially attacking the flank of some SS soldiers, and it's they're really unsure. They hear gunfire. I think one of their men had gotten hit with a grenade, and so Captain Winters is he's kind of doing a solo recon. So he's got his men gathered together, and climbs over a hill and kind of down through a field, and he's just kind of inching his way along, and he really kind of scopes out what's going on with this scene with the men, that the enemy on the other side. And there's a couple scenes that kind of reflect this in episode 5, but on both occasions, Captain Winters is essentially leading the charge. He's by himself. Like I said, he's kind of taking stock, getting that big strategic picture about what's in front of him. And in one scene, it just sees him like bolting off, and he's got a smoke grenade, and he lights it, and he says basically, don't charge until you see red smoke here. And so he's running by himself as fast as he can, just by himself. And his men, his tribe, are sitting there, his squad, they're just sitting there like, let's go. And they're like, not till the smoke comes. And so once the smoke starts to go, all his people, all his men take charge behind him. And they get to a point where he's basically giving each man instruction on a soldier to kill on his fire. And so it's essentially, it reminded me of the old Nintendo game Duck Hunt. It's got all these SS soldiers, and it's just a complete ambush. I think 22 men were injured from Easy Company, and 2 companies of SS soldiers were taken down. I think there were 50 killed, over 100 wounded, and it was just a tremendous feat. Shortly after that, Captain Winters was promoted to executive officer, and it was just it was an amazing battle there. But there's a scene there after the battle is finished where Captain Winters is just reflecting. He's still kind of looking out over the battlefield, and he's just kind of reflecting on what just happened. And at that point, Lieutenant Nixon walks up, and he's just like kind of congratulating him, checking in on him. And as good as that battle was, what I took away is Captain Winters was, I think he lost a man, and he knew him by name. And it was just kind of a real serene moment that, even with such a huge victory, there was pause for just, remorse and the loss of one of his own.
Yeah, man, there's so much in that. It's like he's willing to accomplish the mission and put his men at risk, but he's also not calloused towards their loss of life, which is a great balance. But yeah, to me, this episode with Winters really epitomizes leading by example. There's that scene there where they've got cover. It's like a dam that they're kind of like hiding behind. And, I can see, you can just see this scene in a movie with a lesser commander, right? You can just see how this would go in a lot of other people's commands of like hiding down there in safety and ordering another guy to go charge over the hill, right? And be like, hey, go charge over there and kill the enemy. But he just does it himself. And I love that scene. And he just does what needs to be done. He just takes off and goes and does it, runs the whole thing by himself, kills the enemy. and then everybody comes and follows him, right? So I think that's, we talk in Men's Alliance a lot about leadership by example, and the difference between leading by example and not is the difference between, hey, you guys go take that hill, and hey, you guys follow me. I'm going to take this hill. Right. And I think as leaders, that's how we've got to be, is you don't just tell somebody to go do it. You tell them to follow you. You're asking them. You ask them to follow you because you're going to go do the thing that needs to be done.
Uh-huh.
And that's what that scene just captures to me. What are your thoughts on that, Shadow?
Man, I just like that point as far as leadership, especially in that kind of scenario, especially in like a battle infantry scenario of having a leader that's in front of you, And I mean, there is a time and a place where your men have to be your weapon, where you can't always be in the front.
Sure.
Most of the time you can't always be in the front, but it is good for your men to see that you're not afraid to be in the front, and you have to, sometimes you gotta, buckle up and show them that who's
That's
boss,
right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, and then retreat back so you can, it's hard to see when, things are close to your face, just back up. But yeah, that's a good point of just follow me. 'Cause I had an awesome, platoon commander who just, I would have followed him into battle blindfolded, holding a butter knife, like this dude just knew how to inspire. And he was so much like Leonidas, just that, I mean, he was a tough dude, but he loved his men at the same time. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, you bring up Leonidas, and that's another good example of a leader that, he was out there on the front lines with his men. And so I think, how does this apply to us, this leadership principle of leading out in front, leading by example? How does this apply to us as husbands and fathers and leaders in our workplace, in our tribe, in our family? What do you think? How can we get out in front and lead by example?
Yeah, I think it's being bold, and being willing to, take a risk, step off the boat, so to speak. It's, you've got people counting on you, and especially from a work environment. We've got colleagues above us, below us, subordinates aside us, and when you're technically proficient and you're doing, you're stepping up and leading by example. There's I'm going to butcher it, but there's a verse that I love. It's in Ephesians 6, I think, and it's like something, do nothing for selfish ambition or conceit, but in everything you do, build others up. And I love that verse from a leadership perspective, because that's really what it's about. Captain Winters, he was not in this for himself. And actually after that scene, he was promoted to executive officer. And the first thing he did, he like barely broke a smile. He asked, "Who's got easy company?"
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, it's not like, I'm not chasing the next level. It's, these are my men. And so it's the same thing with, with our tribes, our families, our jobs. God has entrusted these people to us, and leading by example is really powerful. One of the things that I really admire about Captain Winters was just his moral integrity. I mean, it seems kind of subtle, and you and Shadow served, so I'm sure you can attest. But he didn't smoke or drink or cuss, and he was just focused on the mission. And his men they knew that he put his mind and his heart into leading, and they trusted him. It's like you said, about your leader, Shadow, where you go into battle with a blindfold on him, just because you trusted him. You knew he had done his homework, and you knew that he was going to take care of you. So I think that translates in the job front and with our tribes at home. So,
what do you think specifically it looks like as a husband, father, and leader to be technically proficient, as you stated? Like, how can we be? What would be an attribute of being technically proficient as a husband?
yeah, I think obviously there's no manual, with being a husband, but it's um, I, living a godly life, loving your wife and treating your wife with respect. Your kids see that. My little daughter sees that, and
Yeah.
I think that, being technically proficient, it's really just, I love, like in Men's Alliance, one of the first things that we say is, you're not perfect, lead anyway.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're not perfect, and but we have to kind of come to grips with that. Otherwise, we stay on the sideline and we don't lead. So, our families, wives and kids, they desperately crave, father leadership. And so we're going to mess up all the time, Shadow, but I think just trying to keep that true north on, really staying connected, talking to our kids, understanding what they're doing in their free time, who their friends are, not being a helicopter parent, but just, out of a compassion and caring. So, um, they say kids spell love Time, and so a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
technically proficient stuff is just being present physically and mentally. So
That's good.
I think it's also a matter of like you can't lead somebody to a place where you've never been.
I heard that. That's the second time I've heard that this week.
This week.
Yeah,
And
it's good.
when you have a leader that you doubt has been there or you doubt can get there,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've all had like bad bosses probably,
Right.
and they're asking you to do something and you're kind of thinking, I wonder if you can even do this.
Yeah.
Versus when you've got that boss and you've seen him, he comes down and just like demos it and crushes it.
Yeah.
And he's like, here, now that's how you do it. That's what Winters was doing.
Yeah.
Right. So he earns that. And I think about as a dad, I think like the stuff I want to tell my kids to do they see me doing it?
Right.
Right. So I want my kids to see their dad reading the Bible.
Yeah.
This is one reason why, and we've talked about this in the past, but this is one reason why I try to use an actual paper Bible and not just my phone, because your kids don't know.
Right.
Kids just see you on your phone every morning. Like, Dad's on his phone. So I want my kids to see me reading the Bible. I want my kids to see me exercising. I want my kids to see me taking their mom on a date, right? You think about these things, that's leading by example, because what you're doing is you're showing your daughters this is how your boyfriend should treat you. You're showing your sons this is how you should treat your girlfriend, your wife. And then they know, like when you tell them, hey, you need to exercise, or you tell them, hey, you need to read your Bible, they know you're not just saying, hey, go take that hill, right? They know you're saying, hey, follow me. We're taking this hill together. I think that's just a huge part of leading.
That's good.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, there's another scene it's really subtle in episode 5 where Winters has this huge victory with his men. He gets promoted to XO, executive officer, and they've identified his replacement. Who's gonna take over the company, and it's I forget his full name, but it goes by Moose. And so he's walking in the night on the train track, and it's just the two of them. And I love that scene because he's really like pouring into his successor. He's pouring into, he really wants Moose in this case to know, kind of to be bold and to be courageous and to how to win the respect of his men, and just really, it's a really cool pep talk. And I love that. Now, having said that, like 5 seconds into that, some like private shoots him and he gets hauled off in an ambulance. But that little scene there to where he's kind of pouring into his replacement is really powerful. And I think from like a father perspective at home, we often will pull my son aside, and just have a, hey man, let's go for a walk, or the other night I just was like, hey, my daughter, let's go upstairs and just hang and talk for a little bit, and kind of setting aside time to really connect and to, really have those discussions. And I think it's transferable into the workplace as well. We all talk, succession planning and, who's next, when you step down or leave or whatever. And I like that scene because it's, he's really trying to set that, Moose up to be the best leader he can for his men, who he still has, you know, uh, tons of respect for and cares for deeply.
Oh man, that's so good. I would describe him like in that he's strategic with his time. He spends time with his people intentionally.
Mhm.
And that makes me remember at my last assignment in the Air Force, um, they use this great phrase a lot called management by walking around. And it's funny, and it just means you can't lead your people from your desk.
Mm,
Every moment that you spend sitting at your desk is a moment that you are not leading your people. You can't lead by emails.
that's a good point.
Yeah, and it was like, get up, go walk around, go be around your people. Your people need to see you walking around them and checking in and asking how they're doing and seeing what job they're doing and asking them how things are going. And Winters in Band of Brothers is phenomenal at that, right?
Yeah.
He could have just been at his desk writing out a letter of here's everything you need to know
Right.
to my successor, right?
Yeah.
But he's not. He's talking with him, and they're going for a walk.
Man,
Mhm.
I need to write that down.
Management by walking around.
I've read that before. That's good stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, Winters is always crushing it. Okay, so let's go. Were there any negative examples or any bad examples you got from episode 5?
I think toward the back end of episode 5, and we'll get into this with episode 6, but we kind of start to see Lieutenant Dyke come into the picture, and he's kind of the antithesis of a good leader. So and we'll talk, I'm sure, about him in a minute. But
All right, great. Yeah, that was kind of the overlap there at the end of 5, first to 6. So as episode 5 ends, correct me if I'm wrong, that's where they're all getting deployed out to the forest, which will in the next episode become maybe the next 2 episodes become the Battle of the Bulge.
That's right.
So this is where they all head out from the city where they've been fighting in and around a town. Now they're going out to the forest, and they're leaving without proper winter attire. They don't have winter clothing. They don't have winter rations. They don't have enough ammo. And now they're all about to be out freezing in the woods trying to dig foxholes. So that kind of sets up the environment for episode 6. All right, so kick us off, episode 6, Lieutenant Dyke. Give us some examples of bad leadership.
Yeah, you got it, Goose. So if I remember right, starting at episode 6, Winters is standing around a fire. He's got a couple of his senior guys with him, and they're basically like, where the heck's Dyke? I don't know if that's verbatim, but then Dyke walks up and he's like, he immediately is complaining about where the leadership is and that they're in some wedding in France and just some obscure, he's like, where's our leadership? So he's complaining about where leadership is. And Winters looks at him and he said, Lieutenant Dyke, that's the least of your worries. You have men that aren't prepared for these conditions. You need to be gathering as many cold winter, clothes, rations, ammo. Your men you're going to set them up for failure. And to kind of capitalize on the moment, Lieutenant Dyke immediately takes that and says to the 2 guys across from him, basically, hey, you heard him, go do that and report back to me. It's like just a complete dodge of accountability. I love it because they end up calling him Foxhole Norman.
That's just good delegation.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so you could look at it differently, but
yeah, that's so good right there. What a great example of a good leader knows his people and looks out for them. I know that sounds super basic, but a good leader is looking down the chain of command, right? You're looking down the chain at the people under you, the people that you're responsible for, and that's where your focus should be. Your focus should be, how are their feet? Do they need dry socks? Do they need food? Do they need extra coats? Right? You got to be looking at the people that are under you. And in this scenario, Dyke is complaining about the people above it.
Yeah.
You know, where are these guys? Where they're at some wedding in France, and it's like, and Winters kind of like turns his attention, like, focus on the people that you're supposed to be and taking care of.
Yeah.
Right.
Very powerful. All right.
Yeah,
So no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you kind of see that all throughout that episode. I could give you a few other examples, but it's kind of that same theme: dodging responsibility, self-centered. You know, what's in it for me? And yeah, there's several other examples. But go ahead, Goose. Sorry.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Throughout that whole episode, we see examples of Dyke kind of just screwing up and just being a bad leader. What's another one? Can you give us like another example?
Sure. Yeah. So, and some of them are just, you know, like before they're attacking Foy, right? A big battle. You know, the men are kind of strategizing, and they're talking about, you know, the combat plan and, you know, what's going on. And they look over, and Lieutenant Dyke's literally leaning on a tree, just kind of looking off. And they're like, right, Lieutenant Dyke, you know, and he's like, oh, yeah, good, you know, or
yep.
We'll talk about the medic, the rock star in episode 6. But, you know, there's a point where Eugene Rowe, the medic, is going around, you know, getting all the supplies, and he goes up to Lieutenant Dyke in his foxhole, and he said, you got morphine? And he's he goes, I don't know, where is it? And, you know, he's like, it should be in your med kit. And he's like, oh, is this my med kit? And I mean, just completely oblivious. But then it's what he says after that just like, man, it's like a syringe itself. But it's, you know, basically he goes, well, if I give you my morphine and I need it, what happens to me? You know, what if I get hit? And the medic says, well, that's why I'm here, Lieutenant Dyke. But it just, you know, it's not trying to, you know, give to the greater good of the men. It's very, oh, well, what if I need this? You know, like, you know, protecting of what he felt was his when everybody else is given everything they can.
I remember that scene, and it's like painful to watch. It's so cringy.
Yeah.
Like, just already a terrible leader, and then he's just going to be selfish on top of incompetent. Yeah. And you get the whole impression. They never really give these details in the show, but like, there's always something going on with him that like alludes to the fact that he has like some higher up connections.
Right.
Like, he was kind of like put in this spot.
His uncle's a senator or something.
Yeah. There's something about him. He's got some connections, and he was put in command because he knows somebody. And everybody kind of knows that he's only there to check the box. He's there to get his command check, and then he's going to be moving elsewhere. And he knows that too. So he's not really invested in it. And there's just this air of kind of like entitlement. I'm not really here with these men. I'm just kind of, you know, just kind of have to associate with them for this short season that I'm in.
Why are there so many examples of that? Where you know, in movies and even in life, where the guy that gets a job because of who he's related to always stinks.
Well, don't forget, it's a true story.
I know.
Band of Brothers is it's historically spot on, you know?
Yeah.
So I think the reason why is because, man, it's all the time.
Yeah. I think it's because why they always stink is because when you're given a position or something that you didn't earn, you're not good at it. You know, there's something to be said about earning your stripes. I mean, that's a saying for a reason. Putting in the time, you know, getting the experience, learning from good and bad leadership instead of just being thrown into leadership and not having any experience of having good or bad leadership, you know?
Yeah. So
I
when
think
you think
oftentimes, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Shadow, I think oftentimes, you know, people climb to a certain level in an organization based on that trajectory of who they know. And then they finally get to a point and leadership realizes this person can't manage their way out of a paper bag, like put them over here, and
Yeah.
so they end up becoming somebody else's problem. But yeah, I think he was had some connections with division headquarters, and I think he was a Yale. No offense to the Yale listeners, but uh,
Yeah, I flew with some Ivy Leaguers. Man, are you looking to buy a new home? Maybe it's a vacation home, maybe a rental property, or maybe it's building your dream home, and you need a mortgage. Well, I want to tell you about a tribesman who can help you with just that. Chris Norwood, call sign Coop from Hammer Tribe. He works at Towne Bank Mortgage. He has been doing this for over 21 years. He's qualified to lend in 16 states. He can definitely help you out. Let me give you his contact info. You can go to townbankmortgage.com/Chris Norwood, or you can call him directly at 804-439-3206. Again, this is Chris Norwood, call sign Coop. He's a Men's Alliance guy from Towne Bank Mortgage who can help get you a loan for your dream home. He even helped Iron buy his new house. Check him out. So think about this, that scene that you were just describing with the morphine. Imagine that exact same scene, but it's like this green private, this brand new green private. If you saw that exact same scene, you wouldn't think anything bad of the private, right? If the medic's like, hey, give me your morphine. He's like, well, what if I get shot?
Yeah.
That's like, suddenly that's a different scene that doesn't offend the viewer. So there's something that tells us about, there's something wrong with a leader who looks out for their own personal safety over that of their subordinates, right? It's like when we see that scene and it's the officer, we're like, but if you saw the exact same scene and it was like a one striper, you would just be like, yeah, I agree. I want to keep my morphine too, right? So I think that kind of goes into what happens later in this episode when they're about to take Foy, right? Where we see an example of an incredible leader take over all of a sudden and do the exact opposite.
Right.
yeah, absolutely. I think they started to charge Foy, and Lieutenant Dyke had gotten different reports, and I think Winters even, was telling him the game plan, the battle plan. You need to do this. I'm counting on you, and he's like, basically I got it. And I think right after Winters said it and left, it almost looked like he was about to vomit on himself. I think he knew he was so far ahead of his skis that he didn't know what he was doing. And when they started to take the battlefield, I mean, it was managed chaos. Guys are getting shot. He didn't know where his company was. He's looking around. And he completely froze. And that's really, from a leadership perspective, making no decisions is worse than making bad decisions.
That's absolutely right.
He froze, and his men are just getting barraged. And so mid battle, Winters pulls him and puts in a replacement, and it's a completely different outcome because of that.
I want to just pull back just a little bit, and because before then, we can talk about if this was good leadership or bad leadership, but one of the platoon sergeants, I forget his name, the Wahlberg guy, he talks to Lieutenant Winters and is like, Dyke isn't ready for this.
Right.
Yeah. This is that episode, correct?
Yeah, he's warning him before the battle.
Like, Dyke don't know what he's doing. He's going to get a lot of people killed, and Winters doesn't really listen to him.
I think Winters listens to him as much as you can listen to one guy. And I can tell Winters is torn. He's like, okay, well, what the heck?
Right.
What do you want me to do? But he doesn't realize how bad it is.
Yeah, he was basically like, well, that's who's leading you into battle tomorrow.
Yeah.
So buckle up.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, don't say I didn't warn you. And I think Winters does realize, obviously, he's like, maybe I should have listened to him.
Totally.
And that's when he sends in, the legend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a great, quote by Theodore Roosevelt that says, the best thing you can do is the right thing.
Yeah.
The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And the worst thing you can do is nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, like, we got to remember that as husbands and fathers, to just lead. Like
Yeah.
you said earlier, Savage, it's like, you're not perfect, lead anyway.
Yeah.
Because our kids need us to do something. They need us to lead something. They need us to do something. Even if it's totally flawed, it's better than doing nothing.
And listen to advisors that you trust. You know, I think that's a lesson there. Just
That's good.
Listen to the people. You know, there's wisdom in a multitude of advisors. I can't remember, but that's the shadow version of the Bible. But
copyright shadow.
Yeah, that's a Bible verse somewhere in there. But, yeah, just listen to what people are telling you, and don't be afraid
to godly counsel.
Yeah, godly counsel. That's it.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's good. So it's he's on the battlefield. It's total chaos. He's frozen. His men are getting shot all around him, and then Winters relieves him of his command right there, and he puts in charge. He replaces him with Spears. He replaced him with Lieutenant Spears.
Yeah.
And Spears just crushes it.
Yeah.
Right. And you think back to that morphine scene in the foxhole. The thing that makes Spears such a great leader in this combat scene is he has zero regard for his own personal safety.
That's good.
He's out there. He's wherever he needs to be, running, telling, communicating, leading. And I think, you contrast that with the guy that, like, doesn't even want to give his morphine to the medic.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that this exemplifies such a good leadership lesson for us, in that we'll never be great leaders if we're concerned about our own personal safety. Right. At least over the mission. Right.
Yeah.
Obviously we can't be reckless, but it's like the mission isn't going to get accomplished if you try to stay behind cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one scene, Goose, where it's like they're getting just hammered, and one of his men looks at Lieutenant Dyke, and he's like, "You guys handle this. I'm going to go get help," and literally just runs the other way. And they're just like, "What the?"
Yeah. No, that's good.
I'm going to go get help.
Yeah, there's something to that as far as personal safety. Like, you can even in Men's Alliance and talking around the fire, even as a tribe leader, if you don't ever let your men see you get vulnerable, why would they get vulnerable?
That's right.
So it's like, if you don't put yourself in a position where you could, where things could possibly sting, or you might feel like you're being, I don't know, too open, but you're going to fall into the same thing that we all do. So you're going to have somebody like me too. And they're, in my experience, whenever I see a leader do that, I'm like, okay, this guy's for real. He's not trying to put on a facade that he's got it all together. He's relatable. A relatable leader is, I think, something to be valued for sure.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And it sets the climate. It sets the climate for the whole unit or tribe.
Right.
If you see your leader rushing into combat like that, you're like, okay, that's what we do here.
Right. Yeah.
And if you see your tribe leader, sharing personal struggles, you're like, okay, that's what we do here.
Yeah.
If he said
it, well, he's just like me. I guess I can share my stuff,
No, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. All right. Do you have any other? I want to give you, I don't want to miss anything else. What other examples of good or bad leadership do you have from these episodes in your notes that you want to make sure we get? Or did we hit them all?
No, the last one I'd hit is it's the Corporal Eugene Rowe. He's the medic from Louisiana. I forget something Cajun, but he's just a relentless pursuit to help his brothers. I mean, he's the resourcefulness of his character from a leadership perspective is just amazing, because whether you're in the tribe setting or your family or in the workplace, knowing where to go to get things done and really listening to the needs of your people. There's so many scenes with him, but one of them is there's a soldier who lost a shoe, and he's like, "What size are you?" And he's like, "I'm a 9, just like everyone else." So I guess that was the shoe size. But he goes back to the command post back in the city, and he's about to leave, and he grabs a right or left shoe, size 9 off, a wounded, somebody, a corpse there on the street, and takes it back to him, literally hands him a shoe. And there's another one who had frostbite issues and gangrene, and he's like, you need to do this, and just had such a deep care and compassion, just really knew and connected with his men, knew how to kind of give them instruction, but just the resourcefulness of that, I love that, because starting a tribe is, you got to be kind of resourceful, and leading a family, you've got finite resources, and you have to be responsible with them, just like in the workplace. So I really admired just the tenacity of being resourceful, and really kind of aligning needs of his people with resources. And he was just such a connector, just to make sure that people were getting their needs met. I thought that was really powerful.
And I'm so glad you saw that and you mentioned that. I think there's a huge element of this that we can get sucked into, that's complaining about the stuff we don't have. Right? So many people, they just complain about, man, we need, he could have just been complaining about, man, these guys don't have enough boots, they don't have enough gloves, blah, blah, blah. He could have just joined in that, but he looked at, well, here's what we do have, and here's what I can make happen out of that. Here's what I can kind of piece together from what we have. It reminds me of, I'm sure this is an older quote attributed to somebody else, but the first time I ever heard it was Rumsfeld, when he was the Secretary of Defense, and he said, "You go to war with the army you have, not the army that you wish you had." Right? And it was like, because somebody was asking, it was like a press conference, and they were like asking him, wouldn't it be better if you had this? Wouldn't it be better if you had that? And he was like, we don't have that. We go to war with what we've got.
Yeah.
And I think that's good leadership too, is we're not just going to complain, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had better food and better, supplies and housing and all this stuff. It's like, here's what we got. And you think about that from the medic, because the medic is running around talking to everybody. If he's negative, that's going to be contagious and spread.
Yeah.
Right. But if he's optimistic and resourceful, like you said, then that's going to be contagious and spread as well. So
morale is such a huge point of leadership, and just making sure your subordinates are in good spirit, you know, even if it's the worst conditions.
Absolutely.
Do something that inspires good morale, because you can make, you can choose to make the best or worst of any situation. Attitude is so important.
Oh, so true. I think, there's a great quote from the book called Hope Quotient by Ray Johnston. It says, in any circumstance, it's the person with the most hope who's going to be the leader.
Yeah.
And you think about that. If you're the leader, you cannot afford to get down and discouraged and defeated and think, there's no hope, there's no use.
Yeah.
Man, the second you do that, you just stopped being the leader.
Yeah.
Right. And anybody that steps up at that point and is like, oh, we can do it. Come on. Boom. Now that's who they're going to follow. So think about that as the dad in a family.
Right.
It doesn't mean you have to, lie to your kids.
Yeah. Or be fake,
right.
Nothing worse than fake motivation.
Right. But I think it's like a true coming from within optimism. Like, we are going to be okay. We are going to get through this. Times are hard.
Right.
I've talked with a guy who needed to make some cutbacks financially, right? He needed to downsize his house. He needed to downsize his car to help get out of debt. And he asked me, what do I tell my kids? I was like, you tell them exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
And because in doing so, you will help them, right? Say, hey, kids, here's the deal. We're a little bit in debt, and here's my plan. Here's how we're going to fix it. We're going to downsize this. We're going to downsize this. We're going to live a little bit smaller so that we can pay this stuff off. Said, you're going to teach them a lifetime lesson. So that's being realistic, but it's also being hopeful, and it's not being pessimistic, saying, oh, we're so screwed, we can never get this. No, it's like, here's what we're going to do. I got a plan.
Yeah.
But I think the resourcefulness is actually like a really good word, man. I just love that. Think about a leader being resourceful.
And I can't remember what the definition of hope is, but I used to think, if you want to Google it, it's better. I used to think hope was like, yeah, I hope so.
Let's check it.
Yeah. Because people would say, putting your hope in Christ or your faith in Christ. I was like, it's more than a hope. Like, I always thought hope was like, well, I hope it happens. We'll see. But hope is more definite.
It says a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen.
Yeah.
Or an optimistic state of mind that is based on an expectation of positive outcomes. So in either one, it has to do with an expectation of a positive desired outcome. You're expecting it.
Expecting something to happen.
I think that's the key.
Of truth, right? It's not just.
It's not.
Oh, I hope we'll see. It might happen. You're expecting it to happen.
I think that indicates that we misuse it all the time.
We do.
When somebody goes, oh, "I hope."
Yeah, I hope.
Like, no, that's not real hope.
Not real hope. Hope. Are you going to do this? Hopefully.
I hope the yard gets mowed and the dishes get done. I mean,
yeah. Hope is so much more of a sure thing than we put it into. Than we work it into language a lot.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, Savage, man, these were some awesome examples that you brought us. And this was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun. And I think episodes 5 and 6 certainly had some really huge positive and negative. You had in your episodes both Lieutenant Winters running over the dam and charging by himself, just charging into the Nazis. And then you also had Lieutenant Dyke just freezing on a battlefield and having to be replaced. Great examples of optimism and pessimism, and looking out for yourself over looking out for your troops, and investing in them with your time and management by walking around. Just so many great principles there from those 2 episodes that I think can make us better husbands and fathers and leaders at home and in the workplace and in our tribes.
Sure.
Good stuff.
It's been great, man.
Yeah.
Say hey to Spartan Tribe for us.
Will do. Absolutely. We got the Spartan iron sharpens iron. I brought my tribe with me. You can't see them, but they're here with me. So
you guys take that and put that up, don't you?
Every day, every Saturday. Yeah.
Every Saturday. Yeah. I was gonna say I've seen that in the background of some photos.
That looks like a Spartan orc.
I know.
Things like massive.
Shout out to Rocket.
Yeah, man.
Awesome.
So that's good stuff. Thanks for having me today, guys. I appreciate it. It's good to see you, and great discussion on leadership.
Really good, man.
Awesome. All right, guys, that wraps up episode 3 of Leadership Lessons from Band of Brothers. Stay tuned for the next one as we go over episodes 7 and 8. See you around the fire. Thanks for listening to the Men's Alliance podcast. We hope to see you in one of our tribes or at one of our unforgettable weekend experiences. So join us at men'salliancetribe.com.